My name is James Ornstein. I'm involved with the North Texas Renewable Energy Group, and I'm going to be moderating this Q&A session. I want to thank our Terawatt sponsor, Dallas College, and thanks especially to our homeowner, Paul Westbrook, for welcoming us virtually into his home. Thank everybody in the North Texas Renewable Energy Group for putting on this meeting for the 11th year, and thank everybody who's attending this meeting for pursuing sustainability. So the etiquette is, this is scheduled for 30 minutes. We can nominally continue for 20 minutes over, but there's not another session on this account immediately afterwards, so we can go longer. Please mute your mic if you're not speaking. And to ask a question, you may unmute your mic or put your question into the chat box. And with that, take it away, Paul.
All right, well, welcome virtually to the house tour this year. Normally, we just have a 45-minute-ish loop through the house where we talk about passive solar and the design elements, and then we go to the mechanical room and talk about the geothermal heat pump, and then out to look at the solar hot water panels and the solar electric panels. But obviously this year we're online, and since we have a fairly small crowd, if anybody wants to type in the chat box or unmute and ask if there's any areas of specific interest that people are looking for, we can kind of focus on that first, or I can just start showing some stuff and we'll see if that generates questions too. Any specific areas? All right, the other one is, did everybody watch the couple of videos that I posted, or should we run those for quickly and see if that generates some interest of questions?
I haven't seen those videos, but can you explain kind of what we're looking at here? I mean, I'm kind of walking in without seeing this before. So this is the school. I see this is actually your house, but then, you know, because looking at the ground top down.
Yeah, this is for the solar electric system, the solar PV system. This is the screen that I use, the in-phase microinverters. And this is one of their screens that just kind of shows my aerial view of my property. Zooming out a little on it. And so I have 14 panels on the roof, on the south-facing roof. And out here in the field, I used to have a very large wind turbine and sold that because I have too many trees around here. So I popped I already had electrical run out there, so I just popped a couple of extra panels out in the field there. So that gives me my roughly 3.7 kW array. And here's just some of the data over here. You can see month to date, very early here on the 3rd day of the month, but 30 kilowatt hours. Lifetime, I'm up to 38 megawatt hours. This was installed in December of 2012. So coming up on 8 years of trouble-free operation. There's all sorts of graphs and reports that you can do on these as well. In fact, there's the lifetime output from December of 2012 to right now. You can see the seasonal variation in the solar output.
Yes, I do understand it now.
Yeah. Okay.
Are you breaking even in terms of what you're using versus what you're generating? I'm curious to know.
So here was my strategy. I'm on Grayson Collin Co-op, and their policy just changed this year, but for most of the life of my system, and when I designed and decided to install it, they had a policy that if you generated excess in any month, they wouldn't carry over the credits or pay you. So if I had oversized my system to be a net zero home, then in the spring and the fall, I would have been sending back several hundred kilowatt hours a month.
Mm-hmm.
So I would invest the capital and they would get the output and not compensate me. So I intentionally sized my system so that it would basically net zero me in the fall and the spring, and then I would have a smaller bill in the summer and winter. So On average, it's covered about 75 to 80% of our total energy use. The house is very efficient, so a very small 3.7 kilowatt system covers the vast majority of our needs. And this year, they made two great changes at Grace and Collin. They updated it where they will carry over indefinitely. So I've been carrying some credits for some of the months. And then they just added some new billing plans, which they had not had before. And I went on to their free nights and weekends 2 billing cycles ago. And we're running for July and August, the 2 hottest months of the year. We were actually generating credits during the day. And the only energy I used was at night and weekends, and that was free. So I had $0 electric bills, and I'm carrying credits into the cooler months. So it was actually a pretty good setup. Let me go, I've got a little information on.
Yes, I've done the same, and I'm carrying credits on through. In fact, in summertime, I didn't hardly use any of my credits, so that's what I was wondering.
Yeah, no, those were 2 great changes they did. I think I pasted. Yeah, so just a little visual of, when I was getting ready to size my system, I obviously had years of data. And so I went back and, here's a typical North Texas energy use kilowatt hours per month. And I went and got my data here. So there's the blue is the typical North Texas data. And my use pre-solar was much lower due to the passive solar and the efficiency. And just a quick, we had put a metal roof on the house back when we built in '96, and that made the solar installation absolutely simple as could be, because I use these S5 clamps, which have a side screw that grab onto the seam, and then the rails mount to those. So I have no roof penetrations at all. Mounted the microinverters to the rail, put the solar panels over, and we were up and running. But here's my electric bills for this year. And you can see there's a lot of columns on here, but the one to focus on is total net kilowatt hours. And then as we got to day and night, I started adding those columns. The electricity cost and the fees, and then there's the base fee. So we paid $18 a month, but if we ended up sending energy back, there was a $5 penalty. So we basically paid $23 plus fees. $24.40 was my minimum bill if I use nothing from the grid. And when I went to this new plan, they changed the base fee to $23. So I'm still paying the same base fee, which the last 2 months I've paid $24.40 each month. And you can see during the day, we've ended up with slightly positive, and we've used all our energy on nights and weekends. So it's been a really good system for us.
What is your base fee? What is that for, actually? Just the connection?
So that's, the utility. I've had long discussions with Grace and Collin Co-op, and actually they told me that they did an analysis to run all the wires and maintain the transmission system and so forth. There's cost for that. So whether you use any electricity or not, there is cost in the system. And they said their analysis shows it's actually somewhere around $35 per meter is that cost. So they didn't charge that amount. They charged about half, or a little more than half of that as the base fee. And that just covers, whether I'm using energy from them or not, there's a cost to maintain the system.
So for energy, what do they charge you per kilowatt hour then for the electricity?
It's been, here it is over on the right. If you add it's been 11.3 cents, and it actually just dropped to 10.8 cents in the last few months. So 10 to 11 cents a kilowatt hour is their rate.
Okay.
Now, on my nights and weekends plan, it's 16 cents a kilowatt hour for the day and 0 for nights and weekends. So the beauty is I'm exporting my solar and getting credited at 16 cents a kilowatt hour.
Okay. I'm paying a straight 13 cents a kilowatt hour, and that's it.
Okay. Well, that's, yeah. And are you getting, you're getting full credit then? So you're,
Yeah, 1 for 1, and I carry it over to next year. And if I were to leave Green Mountain, then they would cut me a check for the difference. So I'm now at $200 plus credit.
Nice.
so some of the, I talked about how small my system is. I'll pop back over to the passive features, which is what we always start our tour with. The house is 2,700 square feet, but you can see from this wireframe drawing that it's a stacked footprint. So it's a small surface area for the volume of the house. And you're looking at the south face where most of our windows are. And we've got the overhangs shaded properly for window shading. And that's my solar hot water panels that we put in initially. And then the solar electric are now occupying this portion of the south facing roof. But we insulated the perimeter of the slab. We used structural insulated panels, which are very well insulated and also very airtight. We have the galvalume roof, which is reflective. We've got these clerestory windows up top are also on electric operators. So these last few nights have been a perfect example of the passive solar. When it gets cool enough outside at night, we open some upper windows and open some other windows, and you get a natural draft in the house, draws in all the cool air. So this morning it cooled the house down. We were at 66 degrees when I closed the windows at about 9:15. And even if it got to 90 degrees today, the house is so well insulated that the interior temperature will probably only rise to 74 or 75. About the time it starts feeling hot in the house, it's late enough in the evening that it's cooler outside. We can open the windows again and we repeat the cycle. And we actually went, I think the record we've gone is about 2 months without heating or air conditioning and keeping the house at around, in the low 70s average temperature. So passive solar is really, what I love about it is there's no moving parts. There's nothing to fail really. It's just, you do it right at the start and then you get the benefits for the life of the house, which is 24 years. We've been in the house 24 years now last month. Anybody got any questions to throw into chat or pop on your mic? There's so few of us.
I do have a question about if you had a standalone panel with a battery, if you wanted to run lighting, say outside, and you wanted to set up a standalone panel so that you would generate a battery, and then that would connect to all your lighting outside. Have you ever done that or anything like that?
No, we looked at, I see Mike Renner's on, you can certainly, if you want to talk about battery systems, definitely tune into one of his presentations because he is definitely set up that way. We have the grid here when we put in the solar electric. And so we have outages, but they're fairly occasional and not too long a duration. So we decided we would just do the grid tied system. So unfortunately, if the power's down, then our solar electric doesn't produce. And because we chose microinverters, that's a little more difficult. If you're going to do battery systems, generally people will choose a DC with a central string inverter. In fact, I've got a presentation with some of that info. Might be good to answer your question.
I raise this because we have a private park and it'd be nice to have lighting put around on our walk area. But
yeah,
instead of cooking it with electric, just have a solar panel that would charge a battery and it would run off that battery. So,
Jim, this is Michael Fladmark. There's actually systems out there already that are integral design that have for solar lighting for parks and things like that. And I can help you with that.
Yeah, they have lights that have the little solar things on them, but they don't work very well where it's, trees and things like that. So that's the only thing I had. I've worked with those, but they tend to be not as good as having a solar panel that's connecting to something external from the other. So.
Well, shading is always going to be an issue, so you have to be in a clear spot where those lights are located or where your solar array to charge your batteries.
Solar panel had the battery, that would be in the sunlight, and then it would just run a wire from that to all the lights. So that's the thought.
I've seen some street light systems, you know, that have that with basically a couple of panels up on the pole, and then there's a battery tucked underneath there that runs the street light. So it sounds like you're looking for a slightly smaller version of that.
And it might be the same thing on a roof, having 2 panels that would have a charger in the garage for a car, if you had an electric car. So something of that nature.
Yeah, here's go ahead, somebody.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can.
I do know that, you know, we have several solar lights here on poles, but the solar panels integrated into the light itself, and the batteries also in the light, but they also do make units that the solar panel is separate from the light. So you can put the solar panel off to the side where there is sunshine to keep the batteries charged.
Right, that would be the thought.
And you can find them all over the place on Amazon.
So on Tuesday, I'm teaching EarthX Sustainable U for Dallas College. I'm teaching Introduction to Solar Electric, and I've pulled up my slides for that. You guys are getting a sneak preview here, but you know, I was talking about inverters, and here's kind of the 3 ways that generally you can hook up. You can do the string inverter, where you don't have the electronics on the roof. It's easier to connect batteries because your solar panels are coming down in DC, so you could actually go to a battery bank first if you want. The problem is it doesn't optimize each panel. So if you have partial shading, you don't get the full output of your system. Your wires are running in DC, which is less familiar to, you know, a lot of electricians, and you have a single point of failure on a string. The opposite end of the spectrum is what we have, which is the microinverter. There's one on every panel. It'll optimize each panel's output. The wiring is in AC, so it's a lot more familiar to most electricians. You get the panel level monitoring. You saw my output. I could drill down and look at the panel. Harder to integrate batteries in those systems. And then there's the hybrid that's come along with Solar Edge is the biggest one, where they put a DC optimizer, one for each panel, and then go to a string inverter. But that way each panel is its full output if there's partial shading. So that's kind of a quick look at the, and then here's little diagrams of how those go. So, you know, for the string inverter, the central string inverter, you'd have the panels coming down in DC wiring. You might have the optimizers. You could go to a charge controller and a battery as well. And that way you would be, you know, charging your battery directly, going into the inverter, then it goes into your home, net meter and grid. This is the system we have where each panel has the microinverter. It's all AC wiring coming down into the panel, meter and grid. And then you guys, of course, are familiar with net metering, how that works. So,
Well, the smart meter is separate from the net metering with the, you know, how they charge back. But a lot of people know the smart meter is, it's on a, you can also track, people can get on now and track what they're using, you know, the sign on there, and it, from the Encore, I can see everything I'm doing and whatever, separate, even if I don't have solar panels.
yeah, I have Grayson Collin Electric. I just had mine pull up. You can see my net positive days here in the last few days where we're sending back to the grid because it's been so mild, no electricity for air conditioning needed. So we've been banking a bunch of hours here in the last week. And if you're looking for any more information, my website, you know, I've built this over a couple of decades, but there's the solar tour stuff that I put in at the top. But if you go to energized.com/house, there's another old video that's on there. House land details. If you want to get systems, is a pretty popular one. I go into the ground source heat pump, the energy recovery ventilator, solar water heating system diagram. There's the PV array, and there's my old wind turbine that we had from 2006 to 2013 out. The kinetic lawn sculpture is what I called it.
So did you take that down? When did you move the panels and just take it all down, or you left the wind turbine there?
No, so we were, we were a test case. Back in 2006, SkyStream was doing these residential scale turbines, and somebody who had actually come on my tour notified me they were looking for test homes. So we filled out the paperwork, and I was honest. You know, it said you should have a 300-foot clear radius around the turbine. Well, I was honest on my application. I said, we're nowhere close to that, but they were also looking for people with engineering backgrounds to give them some technical feedback on the operation. So they ended up picking me as one of their beta testers. I was the second one in the country that went up. And the president of Southwest Wind Power flew out from Arizona for the tower raising. And I said, I'm curious, you know, I'm not the best site. Why did you guys pick me? And he said, well, we actually wanted to find a site that was not optimal so we could show people, you know, the depressed power output from even just a few trees too close. And he said, plus, he pointed to Channel 8 and Channel 5's news crews that were out there at my wind tower raising and said, you are in a major media market. We are getting great publicity from this. And so we let the turbine run. And, you know, it had a few issues. I had to lower the tower a few times and change out a component, but it got more and more reliable. But it just wasn't outputting. So when we put the solar on the roof, I told Elaine, I said, next time I have to lower that thing for any maintenance, I'm going to see if I can sell it. So sure enough, a guy in Oklahoma bought it. And he said, I asked him if he had any trees on the site. He said, what's a tree? So it's happily, hopefully spinning up where in the plains of Oklahoma now. So where I had that, obviously I had power run out. So I just popped those couple of other solar panels. I could actually, if I need to expand my array, I could put a field array out there. I've got plenty of capacity in the wires. You know, the other thing that I'll cover briefly is solar water heating. We had this, we actually retrofitted this in our old house in Garland back in 1986, I think it was. And then I left that system when I moved up here and we installed solar water heating from the start. Basically, there's a couple of ways to do it, but we use just a typical electric water heater tank as our storage, but it's a really well insulated tank. And there is a tube and a tube heat exchanger here. And so you can think of it as two parallel loops going on. Out of the bottom of the tank comes one loop, goes up through the heat exchanger, and then right back into the top of the tank. And then the other loop is a closed loop that goes up to the pump, up to the roof, up through the solar panels, back down through the heat exchanger. So the little differential thermostat senses when it's hotter on the panels than it is at the bottom of the tank. It turns on the pumps, and that runs all during the day and stores up the heat. And so we'll get hot water coming back from the roof at about, I've seen it as high as about 205, 206 degrees Fahrenheit on a sunny, clear day. And at the end of a sunny day, we'll have an 85-gallon tank with water in it about 160 degrees Fahrenheit. We actually have a mixing valve on the outlet so we don't scald ourselves. It blends the cold water in to get it down to 120 coming into the fixtures so we don't overheat. So I'll pause there. Anybody got any solar water heating questions? Type in chat or just unmute. There's not
I do have one question about maintenance on your panels. You know, have you ever had any problems and how was it difficult to get those replaced or fixed or what?
On the solar water heating panels?
No, those are any panels you have.
Okay, so the solar electric panels, I did the installation myself and I bought them. They were B grade panels, which means they had a cosmetic defect, but they were perfectly, you know, tested fine. And they've all done just fine. Actually, we had one out of the box that didn't work properly. And the guy I bought them from just swapped it out for another one, but put them in 2012 and all my microinverters and all my solar panels are still operating just fine. The solar water heating panels, I actually bought these used. I found a guy who had put in about 12 of them and he was doing whole house heating as well as water heating. He was moving and just keeping a couple for water heating. So I bought two flat plate panels for $100 each. They were manufactured by Lennox in 1978. and they're still working
Yeah.
today.
Paul, I need to leave and jump into my session now. It's starting pretty soon.
Sure. All right, Jim. Thanks.
Thanks.
I had a follow-up to that. The most common problem that I think we've been seeing recently is people having squirrels chewing up their wiring. It doesn't look like you have any squirrel guard there. And I don't know if it's because they don't like the metal roofs, or it looks like you also have a fairly close spacing between the panels and the roof.
I've seen them scampering underneath there and worried about them on the wires. We have, I've got 2 acres of woods here, so we have tons and tons of squirrels, and you can hear their little feet across the metal roof. But so far, they have not chewed on mine. There is access under there. If they ever got hungry for the wiring, they could get under there. But so far, so good for 8 years, almost 8 years now.
Then the other question is, that I don't remember if you said what model Enphase you had, but there were some reliability problems with some of the early Enphase micros that they claim to have fixed now. So
yeah, mine are the
comments on that.
Mine are the M215s, and like I said, so far so good. My neighbor was actually just expanding his system. He put in an array a few years after me, and he found some really low-cost M215s, and I bought an extra pair just in case I want to, one, expand with a couple more panels out in my field, or now I have ready, out-of-the-box 215s in case they're under warranty. So if they failed, obviously, I would send them back and they would get a replacement, but it'd be nice to have one to swap out quickly if I needed to.
Hey, Paul.
Yep.
If you were to do something different, what would you have done different?
Great question.
Yeah, so I would have actually, thinking back to the passive solar side, I would have actually even gone more insulation. I use 6-inch SIP walls and 8-inch roof panels. I would have probably gone 8-inch walls or polyurethane, which has a higher R value, and 12-inch roof panels, because my envelope then would have been really, really good. Now the windows, unfortunately in 1996, there weren't too many windows that were better, that were not just crazy expensive, but there are R5 and R6 windows now that are a reasonable price. So I would have superized the passive part of it a little bit more. And that would have dropped my cooling energy from 2.5 tons heating and cooling to probably close to a ton. And then this wasn't on the market then, but if I were building again now, there's a guy with a unit called CERV, C-E-R-V. I can't remember what the acronym stands for, but he's basically got, like I have my energy recovery ventilator. He's got an ERV, but he's got like a 1-ton heat pump that is tied to it. So basically you have one unit that will do fresh air. And if it needs to kick on the heat pump for heat or cooling, it does that as well. It rejects the heat or cool into the outgoing airstream. So it would have simplified my system to have just one smaller unit, and I would have really been a low use house. The rest of the stuff, I don't know that I would have done differently. I think if I were designing again right now, I would seriously look at, instead of solar hot water, I might have gone with a heat pump water heater and just a few more PV panels to, make up for that. That's another design option I'd have to run the numbers on. Again, it would be more simplifying the systems instead of a whole separate hot water loop and the plumbing associated with that and so forth. Just a couple more PV panels and now a heat pump water heater.
Mm-hmm.
But that's about it. 24 years of data says we got a lot of stuff right. And so that feels pretty good. All right. Any other questions? We're starting to have drop-offs as the people go to other meetings.
No. Just want to thank you for sharing your house, Paul.
Yeah, you're welcome. All right. I see nothing on chat. Anybody final call?
Take care.
All right, we'll be back on at 2, I guess.